Dreamcast is a system that, despite its short lifespan, was blessed with a plethora of amazing games, many of which we still play and enjoy today. But there are also many titles that were headed to the console that didn't make it to store shelves. Sega's departure from the console business was just one of the many reasons why these games were cancelled. While some were eventually released on other platforms, others seemingly disappeared off the face of the planet. Join me as I enlighten you on the history behind many of these games and their ultimate fate. This is episode 6 of the Games That Never Were. Thunderboats by Australian developer Perception was a speedboat racing game that first started development in 1997 and was released in arcades in 1999. The game was planned to be ported to both the Dreamcast and PC as well. The arcade machine was based off of Intel's Open Arcade architecture and ran a version of Windows NT, so Perception was likely going to take advantage of the Dreamcast Windows CE compatibility for the port. Thunderboat's gameplay was very close to the similarly named Hydro Thunder from Midway, but promised to stand out with superior water physics. Both the current weather conditions and the boats themselves would affect the choppiness of the water. The game was also to feature many more CPU players than its competitor, with up to 20 boats per race. The boats in the game would have two different types of propulsion, jet and propeller. Depending on which one you choose, the handling of the boat would be different. While the arcade version only had 6 different boats to choose from, Perception promised more for the Dreamcast version, in addition to extra tracks and modes. The tracks in the game included a jungle located in the heart of a Mayan civilization, an amusement park with a haunted house and pirate ship, and a flooded city called Atlantis. Perception stated that the Dreamcast version of Thunderboats would include 7 different modes. No other information was given, but these modes were likely to include an arcade mode and local 4-player multiplayer. While many may call Thunderboats a clone of Hydro Thunder, Perception did their best to differentiate the game with things like dynamically changing water chop, a larger amount of CPU players, and even commentary from the boat drivers. Unfortunately, this wasn't enough to score them a publisher, and so the home ports of the game were eventually scrapped. Porting the game to PC and Dreamcast would have been relatively simple, so chances are that both ports were close to completion. While the game has never been leaked, there's a good chance that a beta version of the Dreamcast version exists. Star Trek New Worlds by 14 Degrees East is a real-time strategy game that was first announced for Dreamcast in September of 1999 and was to be one of the first online multiplayer games for the system. The story of Star Trek New Worlds takes place in the year 2287, where the Romulans are preparing to test fire an experimental new weapon called Project Shiva. Captain Gibson of the USS Explorer is ordered by Starfleet Command to stop the Romulans from firing the weapon. Upon arrival at the weapons site, a Klingon ship is attempting to steal the weapon from the Romulans, but despite this, the Romulan ship fires the weapon at the intended target. The shockwave destroys the Klingon ship and tears a hole in subspace, out of which come many planets that happen to intersect the territories of the Klingon, Romulan, and the Federation. In the game, your main mission is to gain control of these resource-rich worlds as your chosen race. Depending on which race you choose, the way you tackle these missions will be different. The Federation, for example, is very formulaic in their approach and must follow their prime directive and stick to a strict set of rules. The Klingon will have a more aggressive approach but have a code of honor, which means you'll be looked down upon if you kill a group of unarmed people. The Romulans, on the other hand, have no rules and no code of honor and will complete their mission at all costs. While the main objective will be relatively the same for each race, the way you approach it will be very different. The gameplay is very much like your typical RTS and has you constructing buildings and units to slowly increase your territory and power. You have 14 different missions to play through in the game, and each require you to complete a number of objectives, which include anything from gathering resources to destroying an enemy base. Of course, keeping your own base protected is a high priority as well, as you could be attacked at any time. Rapid growth of your colony is critical, as you can easily be taken out by the weakest of enemies if you stray behind. Star Trek New Worlds was set to be released in September of 2000 for both Dreamcast and PC, but sadly only the PC version made it to store shelves. No reason was given for the cancellation of the Dreamcast port. According to the November 1999 issue of the UK official Dreamcast magazine, the game was about 60% complete, so there's a good chance that a playable build of the Dreamcast version exists. Midnight GT by Rage Software was a racing game that was first announced in August of 1999. It was to be the third Dreamcast game by the developer following Incoming and Expendable. Midnight GT is very reminiscent of Tokyo Extreme Racer in its premise, which involves illegal street racing at night. In the game you would have your choice of one of over 20 different vehicles, most of which had to be unlocked in the game's various modes. Depending on which mode you choose, you would have a selection of either custom concept cars or real-life vehicles from manufacturers such as Ferrari, Alfa Romeo, and Honda. The game was to feature 6 different modes, including Arcade, League, Multiplayer, and Racket. The Arcade and League modes both had you competing in a series of races, but the League mode would be more true to life, with realistic vehicles that could be damaged by hitting walls or other cars. Not only would this damage affect the appearance of your vehicle, but it would also affect its performance. In addition, the road conditions would also affect how the car handles. In the arcade mode, your car would be invulnerable to damage. Much like most other racing games out there, as you progress through either of these modes, you'll unlock more vehicles and tracks which can be used in the single race or multiplayer modes. While the number of players to be supported in multiplayer is unknown, there were talks of an online mode in addition to local multiplayer. Rage Software was eager to push the Dreamcast to its limits with Midnight GT, not only with extremely realistic physics and car damage models, but highly detailed vehicles, smoke effects, lens flares, and real-time shadows. It very well could have been the best looking racer on the console. Midnight GT was originally going to be released in the second quarter of 2000, but was eventually cancelled for unknown reasons. Rather than scrapping the game completely, Rage Software made a deal with Asus to bundle the game as a tech demo with their PC graphics cards. While the demo retains most of the tracks from the Dreamcast version, it only has a single mode and lacks the car damage and realistic physics that were to be included in the completed Dreamcast game. Roswell Conspiracy Theories by Tom Clancy's Red Storm Entertainment was an action-adventure game based off of the animated TV series Roswell Conspiracies, Aliens, Myths, and Legends. While the game was headed to multiple platforms, including the PlayStation 1 and Nintendo 64, the Dreamcast version was being designed from the ground up to take full advantage of the system's capabilities, including the use of cel shading to make the game look just like its TV counterpart. Both the TV show and the game have the same plot. Aliens have been living on Earth for centuries, but not in the form of little green men as most would believe. Instead, aliens have taken the form of mythological creatures such as Bigfoot, vampires, and werewolves. Some of these aliens have started to prey on humans, and it's up to Nick Logan and Shalane Blaze as part of a group called the Global Alliance to defend the Earth. In the game, you'll play as both Nick and Shalane, who both have their own unique skills. Nick is a bounty hunter who's your typical action hero type, so he specializes in hand-to-hand combat, and Shalane is a rebel alien from the Banshee clan who has special powers such as the ability to levitate objects and emit energy streams. As one of these two characters, you'll traverse through 40 different levels. Each of these levels will contain puzzles, collectibles, and of course a number of enemies. The enemies could be either captured by using special high-tech weapons or avoided by being stealthy. A big emphasis was put on finding various collectibles hidden through each level. The Dreamcast version even allowed you to trade collectibles with friends by connecting two VMUs together. Roswell Conspiracy Theories was originally headed for release in November of 2000, but was delayed until the next year. In March of 2001, both the Nintendo 64 and Dreamcast versions were removed from the developer's website, indicating that they had been cancelled. On May 28th, the game was released for both the PlayStation 1 and the Game Boy Color. Renegade Racers by Promethean Designs was an arcade-style hoverboat racing game that was originally headed to the Nintendo 64 under the name Wild Water World Champions. The Nintendo 64 version was eventually cancelled and development moved to the PlayStation, PC, and Dreamcast under the name Renegade Racers. The story of the game involves a billionaire named Buck who invites renegades to join him in a racing adventure. Out of thousands of entries, he chooses just 12 to compete in the race. In the game, you would choose one of these 12 renegades to race as, all with their own unique characteristics and skills. These characters include a cowboy, a gangster, a mad scientist, a rich snob, and even Frankenstein's monster. The game features 6 different areas to race in, ranging from the frigid Arctic to the ride-filled fairground to the glimmering lights of Las Vegas. Being a boat racing game, most of the time you'll be racing on water, but thanks to the versatility of a hoverboat, you'll occasionally race across land as well. Renegade Racers aims to be a water-based kart racer, so you'll of course have your typical boxes scattered around the tracks, which contain weapons and other items to help you win the race. These items include missiles, mines, shields, speed boosts, and a weapon which gives you the chance to miniaturize your competitors. Picking up the same item twice will upgrade that item and make it even more powerful. In addition to the weapons, each track would have shortcuts and alternative routes to help you gain an advantage over your opponents. The game has several different modes, including arcade mode, which has you competing in over 30 different races and events. The various events include airtime, the goal of which is to jump off a ramp and stay in the air as long as possible, battle race, which is exactly what it sounds like, and dodgems, which is a standard race with objects scattered around the track which you have to avoid. There are also boss battles where you have to race against a boss character. Beating this character will unlock him for you to play. Renegade Racers was headed for a late 1999 release on all platforms, but was delayed until the following year. Sadly, on February 1st of 2000, it was announced that the development of the Dreamcast version had been halted. The game was released on PS1 and PC later that same month. It's unknown why the Dreamcast version of the game was cancelled. In 2015, a playable build of the game was revealed by the Dreamcast Junkyard. It appears to be fairly late in development, but only includes one track. And so ends another journey into the wondrous land of unreleased Dreamcast games. The Dreamcast and many developers represented a whole new world of potential for video games. That potential came in the form of amazing graphics, online multiplayer, and innovative features that were not possible on other consoles. In a quote from 1999, Interplay stated, "With new opportunities never before seen on a console system, we are allowed to step beyond the normal realms of the gaming field and pull you into our lavish land of fantasy. Luckily, we were able to experience a lot of this potential, but you can't help but wonder what might have been." I hope you enjoyed this episode of The Games That Never Were, and until next time, thanks for watching.